Numbers are hard because you've got to get the right numbers and they got to be in the right order too.
We got to fix that.
The order is important.
Number soup is what we need.
That sounds delicious.
What?
Why doesn't, wait, hold on. Why doesn't that exist?
Number soup?
We have alphabet soup for all the fucking English majors like you. What about number soup for the scientist kids?
There ought to be number soup. I don't know why there isn't.
There should be a number soup.
Listen, no, I'm just spitballing here. Number pudding.
I think it'd be really fun to have a number soup and just leave some numbers out. Just like leave out 6.
We don't do 3s.
Yeah, exactly. No 3s.
You do 3s in your soup. Oh, that's going to be awful.
I mean, think about the offering Campbell's. They could have like an even number soup, an odd number soup.
Yeah, sure. Divide it up.
A soup with just imaginary numbers.
Oh, I like that.
Right?
Quiet, please.
Prime number soup.
Prime number soup.
This is prime soup right here.
That would be great. Just like a piece of fettuccine that they print a really long,
In 4,
a really long number on.
3, 2.
The Apple Company presents a truly terrible podcast. Welcome to Nonsense Season 2, Episode 17. I'm Jeff Parker.
Is that my father in the control room?
Yes, it is.
Why is he here?
Who are you?
I'm CJ Little.
This is our take on the week's business, tech, and entertainment headlines. This time, we'll take a look at ways criminals use emails, texts, or calls to steal your personal information.
There are so many ways. This show is only 45 minutes. We can't cover all of the ways that they steal this information.
It's World Password Day. Still using your cat's name followed by an ampersand for your bank account password?
Fuck, hold on. Let me go update it.
That's not enough to protect your money in 2024. Intel created World Password Day, the first Thursday of May, to address the critical need for strong passwords. Modern password managers like Buttercup make this easy. It's free and open source, available for all major platforms, including mobile. It's even cross-browser. Buttercup is a simple way to generate and manage strong passwords. Link in show notes.
Buttercup I have not used. I looked at this briefly. It looks like it's a reasonable solution. I can also strongly endorse Bitwarden, which is another open source product that I think works great. Just please use something, even if it's 1Pass, just don't use LastPass. Like, you might as well just go ahead and post them on your Twitter account if you're using LastPass, I think.
How is your week going?
Well, not have to change all my fucking passwords because you told people about the cat's name.
Cat's out of the bag.
No, this week has been great. And I'm so excited about this week because this is one of my favorite times. It started out very strong. I was hosting my oldest son's birthday party. We had a mad scientist. It was incredible. I was very happy with how it came out. He wanted a mad scientist theme, so we had like drinks with dry ice in it. So it was like, bubbling and smoking.
Sure.
We had a mad scientist come that did like experiments with the kids. He was excellent. Like, I expected it to be mediocre. He was excellent. Then we had this dude show up to do liquid nitrogen ice cream.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was like, this is going to be all show. The product's going to be shit. Like, it'll be an 8 out of 10 on the show. Oh no, complete opposite. The ice cream is fantastic.
Sure.
The show was okay, but it's really, the ice cream is great. He was lovely. This is Scott over at Nitropod. I will definitely plug him. If you're in the LA area, have him show up. And of course, he shows up in a Cybertruck because why the fuck not? Like, you're making liquid nitrogen ice cream.
You told us he was going to, yeah.
He shows up in a Cybertruck with this like 180-pound dewar full of liquid nitrogen, and he could not have been more nonchalant with the liquid nitrogen. And I'm like, I'm wearing flip-flops. I don't want to be anywhere near that. Like, this is how I lose
super dangerous.
toes. Yeah. Anyway, it was super fun. We had a great time. You were greatly missed, but the kids had a lovely time. So we had a ton of fun.
That's awesome. And be sure and tell your son from me happy birthday.
He has no idea who you are.
Very good.
Actually, he does. This is true. When we listen to the show, my kids like to listen to the show every now and again. Why, I don't know. I think they want to learn new swear words from me. When they listen to the show, my son will say, Daddy, I know which one's you, which I think is really funny because we get feedback from listeners that say they can't tell us apart.
Sure.
But apparently my kids know the drone of my voice. Anyway, That was my week so far. How's yours?
Lakers got knocked out. Denver moves forward and go Dodgers.
This is like what was expected to happen, right? Weren't the Lakers like barely going to make the playoffs and then just get the shit kicked out of them? Wasn't that what we were all planning on?
Let's get to our headlines. China's electric cars keep improving, a worry for rivals elsewhere. Automakers in China are building a new generation of bigger, more technologically advanced and competitive electric cars, threatening to leap further ahead of their global rivals as they step up exports around the world. This is a big story in the New York Times yesterday.
I don't think their cars should be leaping. I think they're doing it wrong if the cars are leaping.
There are dozens of car companies operating in China, and they plan to put 71 new battery electric models on sale this year. Many new models have taller hoods for a bolder appearance and more storage space. The cars have bigger tires that improve braking. The seats are thicker and more comfortable. The batteries are even smaller and more powerful and quicker to charge.
What percentage of these 71 new models, though, are going to be approved for use in the EU and the US?
The exact same percentage that get exported.
Great. Wow. Causation or correlation on that one, big guy?
Obviously, a certain percentage probably are just for their own domestic use.
I would think.
I don't think we're going to allow a lot of them into the U.S. For some reason, we seem to like ban them. There's not a BYD car in America.
Sure.
I do think that a lot of Europe will use them, and Europe is basically operating to the same standards that we are.
I'm really interested in, obviously, the safety. Creature comforts I don't care about too much. I think they'll get that into the market at some point.
Again, the ones crossing into the EU, they're passing EU safety standards.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to see it. Like, and how well are they performing? Because passing is one thing, but are you exceeding it? You know, how are you doing in crash performance?
To get into the EU, you've got to do the crash tests.
You can't do those things.
Same thing.
You don't really want to kill your customers if you can avoid it. Listen up, Elon.
Apple must open iPadOS to sideloading within 6 months, the EU says. Starting in March with the release of iOS 17.4, iPhones in the European Union have been subject to the EU's Digital Markets Act, a batch of regulations that, among other things, forced Apple to support alternate app stores, app sideloading, third-party browser engines in iOS for the first time.
If I understand this correctly, was it because specifically the DMA, they just said iOS and they didn't say iPadOS, and Apple's like, all right, it's not iOS.
Apple just assumed, well, they must not mean iPadOS.
Well, I've got an idea.
What's that?
I think with the next release, which would be 18, they should just change the name from iOS to something different.
Keep changing the name.
They'll never figure that out, right? Like, it's just cat and mouse game where they're like...
This is totally Apple's whole strategy against the EU.
It's called JOS, the new OS from Apple.
Eventually, they're going to piss off those EU regulators so much.
But what are they going to do? Ban Apple? Good luck. Good luck. Sure. It's not like we would ban some social messaging company.
It's not that they ban them. It's that they give them fees of like 6% of turnover.
Yeah.
You know, some enormous amount of money that they charge them.
Do you think like there's just like at Apple, like Tim just doesn't know what turnover means?
That's the problem.
And he's like, a turnover? What? It's a pie? And they're like, sir, it means revenue. He's
revenue.
like, what the fuck? It's revenue? Fuck.
Somebody should have told me that.
Yeah, send in the big guns. Send the ghost of Jobs over there to the EU and let him...
Get me my comms department.
This is kind of fascinating to me, but I think expected, right? I mean, wouldn't you expect them to roll through?
Yeah, I would. Of course. The EU is not messing around.
WatchOS is next. I'll be curious because I think their position right now, didn't we talk about this on a previous episode, where the sort of view of the WatchOS is as an accessory to the phone and not its own platform? And that's
I said that. The EU does not believe that. The US does not believe that. I'm the one who said that. Because if you look at the DOJ lawsuit against Apple, they break out the watch as being a separate device.
Yeah. No, as I was saying, wasn't there some idiot that was saying the WatchOS is an accessory?
There was an idiot who said that.
No, I buy your argument on that, which is one, weird that you're making an argument in support of Apple, and then two, that we agree on something.
I'm telling you, every other week I'm going to piss off the pro-Apple camp and the anti-Apple camp.
At the same time?
I have issues on both sides.
That is a skill.
Now,
you're just not happy. That's really what it comes down to.
I do think the earbuds are not part of the phone in the same way that the watch is part of the phone. The earbuds the earbuds should work on every possible device. It should be just a standard.
Because it's like a dumber device, right?
It's not dumber. It's just simpler. It's sending and receiving Bluetooth signals, so it should work with anything, and anything should work with it.
I could buy that. Okay. Now, I want to make sure the hate mail goes to you and not me. So they can send it to Jeff at Nonsense.Productions and not to me, please.
Google lays off staffers from Flutter, Dart, and Python teams week before its developer conference. Ahead of Google's annual I/O developer conference in May, the tech giant has laid off staff across key teams like Flutter, Dart, Python, and others, according to reports from affected employees shared on social media. The interesting part of that to me is Python is like the language that is used to make AI work mostly.
This is really confusing to me because what I've read is that they didn't kick out all of their Python developers. They basically shut down
the team in
one
the US.
Python team, in the US, in preference for another team in Germany, which does not seem like a cost transference. It's not like you're going to be saving a bunch of money
in Germany
with developers in Germany, right? So they didn't go with like the lower bidder there. I just don't understand how you would have a team in Google that like, was it a battle to the death? Like, did they know? This is just very strange to me.
In a world of AI development, you would think they would be grabbing all the Python teams they could grab.
And I'm also hopelessly optimistic that Flutter and Dart are about to make it because I think both of those things are better than the alternatives, and they've been around long enough that I would like to see both of those continue to make it. They haven't crushed all of the staff for them. It was just significant chunks of those teams.
I have less love than you for Flutter and Dart.
Well, because the alternative is I have to go back to write the other thing whose name I don't say.
Yeah, you do.
That's
and that gives you faster execution.
My God, are you still like optimizing for transistors? Like what? It's 2024, sir.
I am a firm believer that a website should never take more than a quarter second to load.
I'm totally fine with that. Just run it on your Cray 12 supercomputer and it'll load super fast. I'm more focused on developer time. I care more about developer time and maintenance.
I could not care less about developer time. It could not matter less to me.
Yes.
Unless you're just doing something that's, some demo for something. But once you've gotten to the point where you actually have a product you're going to put out, no, it's all about user time.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it should be reasonable. But
meanwhile, as Google is laying off the Flutter, Dart, and Python teams, the basic programming language turns 60.
Wow. Was it quoted as saying go to 40?
Yes.
Just
You and I learned on basic. You and I learned on basic.
I feel like everybody who's older than 30 learned on basic.
It was a great way to teach programming.
It was an exceptional way to teach programming.
Yeah, it really was. Okay, enough of the headlines. Up next, we're going to look at the ways your personal information could get stolen.
In addition to the ways you're giving it away.
Yes, Facebook,
sure.
Instagram, and all those things. Yes.
Your phone service, your AT&T and T-Mobile providers, they're all just fucking giving it away. Your car, DMV, everything. I don't know when I turned into the evangelist arm of the EFF, but apparently that's me now.
Exactly.
And they're not wrong, by the way. Those folks are doing great work.
Let's talk about it then.
All right, I'm in. So as we mentioned earlier today, which is, what is it, May 2nd?
Yes, it is.
The second day of May, also known as World Password Day.
Yes.
So as we mentioned at the top, everybody should rotating their passwords to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Nobody will know. As we mentioned earlier today, May 2nd, World Password Day, highlighting the importance of strong passwords, good password hygiene, combating online security, being very proactive.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to phishing.
What's phishing? What do you mean? Oh, phishing.
Phishing.
Yes.
Phishing with a very soft
It's pH phishing.
pH phishing. Now, not phishing at the Sphere, where Drew Carey gets super fucking high and goes on talking about how crazy it was. I'll put that link in the show notes. This is phishing with a pH, as we mentioned, referring to an attempt to steal sensitive information. So your usernames, your passwords, your credit cards.
Hang on before you go. If you're going to say phishing with a pH, why does it start with a pH?
That is a great question that has been lost in the sands of time.
No, it hasn't. I know the answer.
That is a great question that I think you know the answer to.
Because maybe I'm just a little bit older than you. When you used to steal phone calls from Ma Bell,
Freaking.
it was called phone freaking, and it was spelled PH, freaking. Phishing is just literally that's where it comes from. That's the derivative. That's all.
But did you fish via phone? I know phishing more.
No, you didn't fish via phone, but it was a derivative of freaking. You would do phishing from email.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is the progression here, I'm not saying you're wrong about this, I'm trying to understand the progression. Is the progression that you had phone freaks and they took the PH because it was sound and it was phones.
Yeah, right.
So they said, oh, well, we'll take the F and freak and make it a PH phones. And then in phishing, because it was people that were literally fishing, like trying to catch fish with bait.
Yeah.
That's where the term comes from. But there's no PH in the computer world in this analog. So they just said, well, once before we took the F and used the PH, let's just do it again.
Freaking to phishing.
That's kind of great.
Yeah.
Had I thought about this for a while, I would have probably figured it out. But
the history of that is pretty cool.
That's kind of great. Because people will still be like, were you a hacker? And I'm like, I was more of a freak.
Yeah.
And I like to just say that most people don't know what it means, but the one rando guy on fucking Hacker News that gets it, he's my guy.
He knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I have to message him before 5 p.m. because they turn off the internet at Belmont Village at 5 p.m. and he got to go sleepy time. Anyway, I had Belmont Village on my bingo card today.
Excellent,
by the way.
excellent.
Had to work that in. So we know what phishing is, right? This is someone, an attacker, luring in a victim to get sensitive information from them, right?
Like what? You were saying sensitive information?
Your usernames or passwords or your credit card numbers, bank confirmation, stuff like that. Like things that typically they can use to make money.
Okay.
That's, I think, typically what those things are used for.
They're con men, they're con artists is what they are.
Do you get a lot of phishing requests, attempts on you?
I don't. But again, I don't look at SMS. SMS is not my thing. If you want to message me, you can reach me on Signal.
Yep,
email, I mostly don't look at email.
Yeah, okay. Me and you are kind of the same person. So I do look at SMS, though, because I get a lot of things via SMS that I want to look at, like order updates for the pizza being delivered to my house or one-time code for two-factor auth, whatever. So
I get those one-time codes, too, and I do have to use SMS for those. But mostly I try.
Yeah, you don't look at SMS.
I don't, unless I'm expecting a two-factor authentication code. I don't look. I don't care.
I mean, as an aside, I look at email so infrequently. I have this problem. People are like, are you coming to my kid's birthday party tomorrow? And I'm like, what? Like we sent you an email 3 weeks ago. Let me go look for that.
Yeah, don't do that. That's not going to work.
That's terrible that I act that way, but I do. So phishing is a big deal, and it's not easy, as I want to talk about here in a couple episodes. Today, really just starting to talk about phishing. It's not easy to decipher. I think we're
sending out an email to somebody. We're phishing. We're trying to get them to give away vital information so that we can steal money from them.
Usually, steal something.
Okay.
But money typically where it ends up, right? Makes the world go around. These are super prevalent. I was digging around as I was sort of thinking about talking about this today. And according to Guardio, They did some analysis covering January through March of this year, of 2024. The USPS was impersonated in almost 12% of all phishing attempts.
Oh, wow.
Which is insane, which is a significant pivot towards brands associated with daily communications and online transactions.
Yeah.
The USPS's brand was 12th in brand misuse just 2 quarters ago. So there was at 1.9%.
Sure.
Now it's at 11.6%.
Because we all have to deal with the USPS. So it's probably as a general broad phishing thing, it's probably very effective.
Now, with these USPS attempts, you're typically seeing an email or a text about issue with a package delivery or requesting personal information to resolve it. That's typically what they're saying is, hey, we're holding a package for you. We need X, Y, and Z in order to deliver.
And we all get packages and we all want them delivered smoothly. So that probably works.
Otherwise, you're not going to get your air fryer. How else would you get your air fryer unless you could talk to the USPS? Second on the list is Microsoft, right? With just over 9%.
Because so many people use Microsoft.
Yep. And Microsoft support issues, right? So there's an issue with your user account. And then these unsuspecting individuals, they're sort of lured into clicking a link that installs malware, redirects them to some phishing webpage or whatever. But again, to your point, some people have Microsoft products, whether it's Office or Windows.
So many people have it.
And I think most folks look at it and they go, oh, somebody's trying to help me. It's like, no, they're not.
Right.
You've got Meta. Meta's up there with over 6% of these, which is typically like an account verification. So they're asking you to verify your account, and then it's phishing to get your Meta login information. And then this one surprised me, just because I didn't think it would be such a good target audience. Steam is next on their list.
The game engine.
Yeah, the game engine. So, and this is typically where there's, they're pretending there's some issue with your Steam account or with payment for a game, and they're trying to pull you into some page that looks like Steam to just gather your information. I'm not sure. I would think Steam players would be less likely to fall for this, but again, they've gotten so good, it gets harder even if you are technologically versed.
And Steam has gotten so broadly used.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a much bigger audience too, right?
Let's back up. What's the opposite of these? Because there are phishing attempts that are to specific individuals. Those have a different name. Those are called
catfish?
Spear phishing.
Oh, spear phishing.
When I'm literally going after a target, not everybody who uses UPS, I'm looking for a guy who has a dog named Barkley, and I can spear phish that guy.
But that's where it's targeted at a specific person with specific information.
Right.
So you're trying to say, I must be trustworthy because I know this about you. I know that your dog's name is Barkley. Yeah.
You can click on this link and we'll help Barkley get his medications or whatever.
I'm curious what portion of the attacks are this. My hunch is it is a very, very small percentage.
Spear phishing?
Yeah, they probably have a much higher success rate.
Yeah.
But I think right now, at least the most of what I see, which is not a good proxy for what's out there in the universe, is just these very broad dear users.
Sure.
They're not merging in your information. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just think the majority of them are general phishing attacks.
Let me give you one even more specific. You probably know about this, but when you are going after somebody, usually in a C-suite, somebody who's in the top of the executive ladder, that's called whaling.
Yeah.
And they're going after somebody they pretend to be somebody in the company, or they pretend to be somebody very high up in the company, very trustworthy. We're the IT department. We need your passwords, blah, 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 blah. And that can be very effective because they know really specific things and they can spoof that person's own IT department, perfectly.
When they refer to that as whaling, I feel seen.
Good.
Yeah, I've been adjacent to some of these with friends and associates that have had to deal with some of these requests. It is amazing how effective these can be, even with more than a modicum of training and information to folks, telling them, what phishing looks like and to avoid it. I have seen things where folks have redirected payment, like direct deposit payment.
Wow.
Right? They've masqueraded as the employee, and it's gone on for months, and the employee's just been like, I've been paid in 4 months. And the payroll's like, what the fuck? Why did you wait 4 months to tell us?
Right,
and they're like,
right.
We thought you'd catch up. Like, we didn't, like, what? Oh. You know what I mean? Like, it's this weird miscommunication. That money is gone, right? You're never seeing that again.
Sure.
Long gone. And those were these very simple requests from emails that look legit and people don't dig in. I think on email phishing, especially if you're in the G Suite, they've done a really great job of identifying things that are from external email interfaces. So when you try to spoof someone's name, it looks like, oh, hey, this is at least coming from a different email address. But people have bad email hygiene and they think, oh, they sent it from their Hotmail account. It's jparker@hotmail.com. Like he's just using his home email to request that I wire $400,000. Your typical phishing attempts via email and text are things where they're sending you something that looks like urgent. If your account has been compromised, your package needs to be delivered, something like that. Like that's typically the stuff that I see.
There's a time urgency. There's a sensitivity.
Yeah, typically. Now, there's other things that are coming up that I think still fall in this phishing umbrella, especially around fakes and deep fakes. A couple of these are interesting. There was a scam recently. It was an ad on Facebook. I don't really think it was a deep fake. They call it a deep fake. I think it was just a poorly edited fake.
Sure.
But it ran on like Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, that claimed Taylor Swift was collaborating with what's that French company that makes the enamel cookware, the enamel cast iron cookware?
Enamelware, yeah, La Crusette.
La Crusette. That they were offering free cookware sets, right? They had a bunch extra. It was an overrun.
And those are expensive.
Yeah, right. The ad, I'll put a link to the ad in the notes. It was pretty kind of well done. They're like, oh, there's only 3,000 of them. There are restrictions. You have to be in the U.S. and you can only have one per house, right? I was like, and it's supposed to be like Taylor Swift's voice doing all of this, and then all you had to do was pay a quote delivery fee.
And she's selling enamelware.
Right? Which makes perfect sense.
Does she even cook? I don't even know if she
well,
cooks.
This was a deep fake of her, so whatever. I don't want the deep fake and do whatever you want.
Or, as you say, a shallow fake.
This was a shallow fake. Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you have a deep fake of Taylor Swift and that's the thing you have her do, I don't think you're using your technology well.
Right. Why?
I'll be like, you need to wash all my cars. Start at the big one. Oh, and there was another one that was I think it was Ulta. There was like a deep fake rendition of Jennifer Aniston and J-Lo promoting these Ulta beauty products. And, they're using these lifelike appearances of celebrities to endorse whatever, some offer, some product, try to funnel consumers towards these scam websites.
Yeah.
Not to mention, if you listened to the show last week, when Twitter has a engineering fuck up and they just randomly replace a bunch of URLs to domains that don't exist, right? That's another ripe opportunity for phishing, where people...
That is prime phishing.
I mentioned USPS earlier, the United States Postal Service. I dug a little deeper on this, and this absolutely fascinated me. I wanted to chat about it a little bit today. Following the 2023 holiday season, so just a couple months ago, Akamai, are you familiar with Akamai? Mm-hmm. So Akamai has been around for 100 years. They've been around for 20, 30 years. They see a lot of traffic. They were one of the early companies to provide edge, not really edge computing, but edge asset storage, so that you could have like 250 points of presence. You could put all your assets on the edge.
Sure.
And they were very close to consumers. The point is they see a lot of traffic.
Explain this so it's a little better for...
Yeah, sorry, I'm glossing over things.
If your website needs a certain image to appear on it, the website's hosted someplace far away, the image can be hosted quite close to you. Yeah. And Akamai is responsible for those servers, or at least they're one of the people who are responsible for those.
It's called a content delivery network is what this term has been coined. And Akamai was one of the early ones and arguably one of the best early on. This has been completely commoditized. You put your assets now at Amazon, at AWS, you click a button and it puts it all out onto their edge cloud network. There's some researchers at Akamai that I like to follow, and they uncovered a significant amount of highly likely malicious activity and domains purporting to be associated with the USPS. And they asked themselves, how big of a problem is this? So they looked at 5 months of DNS traffic to the legitimate domain, USPS.com.
Got it.
And they look at DNS traffic to illegitimate, what they call combo squatted domain names. So basically, they looked for anything that either started with USPS, ended with USPS, or contained a USPS hyphen or hyphen USPS. Basically, anybody that's trying to like tack shit onto USPS. This certainly did not catch all of them.
Right, sure.
But it caught a good chunk of them, right? So this is some examples they gave were like USPS-stampservice.com or USPS-lookup.com. Shit like that, right?
Yeah. So it looks legit. It looks like it's coming from USPS.
Here's the sort of the part that broke my brain when I looked at this analysis. They discovered that the number of DNS queries to the collected malicious domain names was generally about equal to the number of queries to USPS.com.
Oh, wow.
And would even exceed it at peak times, which means these spoof sites are getting more traffic than the USPS site itself.
Than the actual site,
Which is kind of insane. Had they said 20%, that would have been like, whoa, 20% is a lot.
Right, of course.
But they have said it's 100%, like, right?
That's
this is
amazing.
the same amount, which is nuts. And then they did this sort of, further analysis, most of which I will spare our listeners so that they don't fall asleep at the wheel. But they saw TLD, a top-level domain, is the suffix that you see, a .com, a .org, a .biz, whatever. There used to only be a handful, now there's bajillions of them. They asked the question, how many different TLDs do you see? And of course, I like to answer the question in my head because I like to think I know everything. And I was like, I don't know, maybe a dozen? Like, how many TLDs could they be using in this scam?
That you see commonly? You don't see that many commonly.
Yeah. And then these phishing attempts, 233.
Wow.
They saw 233 different TLDs associated with malicious activity. The top 5 were .com, .top, .shop, .xyz, whatever the fuck that means, and .org. And it turns out, I didn't even know what .top was. I'd never seen .top before. I've never paid attention to it.
I've never seen it either.
Right? That .top TLD seems to be these sort of threat actors' favorite alternative top-level domain. It came in second with more than 3,000 different domain names as part of this sort of scam research they did or phishing research they did. That generic TLD is operated by a technology company in China and is well known for phishing campaigns. So pretty much, just as a takeaway from this, if you see a .top, just don't click on it.
Stay away.
It's probably not legit.
Don't click on anything. If somebody sends you an email or an SMS message and they have a link in it and you didn't ask for it specifically,
exactly.
don't click on it.
Unless it comes from us. If it comes from us and it says
Oh, for sure.
funjeff.top, then I'd click on that. And I'd really put as much as you can. I'd put as much as you can into that. Also interesting on this, I feel like, and this you're going to see this come up as we sort of talk through this, a lot of these companies don't help themselves, right? They make this even harder for the user. Let me give you an example. The USPS is a really interesting example because they have access to one of the most exclusive, if not the most exclusive, TLD, which is .gov.
Right.
You have to be a government entity. I think you actually have to be a federal government entity.
U.S. government
A U.S. government entity
yes.
to get a .gov. So there's only a handful. And when you see a .gov, you just know two things. One, it's official and legit. Two, it's going to look terrible.
Yeah, sure.
Those are the two things you always know, right? There's never been a .gov site where you're like, oh, this is a modern website. They're always like, it's like Ohio. Everything comes to .gov 10 years later. That's sort of how I think of .gov. At some point, I feel like I kind of remember when this was, but it was like in the early 2000s. The USPS decided to push from .gov to .com as their primary domain.
Because everybody knows .com and you think that's the more common. So
I get it.
Sure.
But you're the fucking USPS. Like, you've got 1,000 trucks. You put a little red flag up and a guy appears and takes your mail. Like, you can be .gov. Push USPS.com to .gov.
Sure.
That's what I would have done.
Or I'm surprised they don't take all of them. I'm surprised they don't take .edu, .net, .org. Every USPS flavor of
just go take
USPS.
eminent domain. Just go take eminent domain on everything.
Exactly.
And be like,
I'm surprised they don't because they do so much web traffic.
Yeah, I'm sure they've tried to prevent squatters on a lot of these. Maybe they do have USPS.edu. .edu is another hard one to get. You can't just walk in and get a .edu.
Right.
USPS.edu does not resolve.
USPS.productions, because we do nonsense.productions. Our top level domain is production.
By the way, I'm going to write my senator and be like, we need a nonsense.gov. I would like nonsense.gov. I think that would be great. This USPS story kind of broke my brain for a minute because this is a lot of traffic and it's obviously it has to be working. They wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't work.
Oh,
so
clearly,
it has to be working.
Yeah.
Some small percentage of people are getting through. And I thought it'd be fun today to talk a little bit about why we think this is happening. Like, what is it that's leading to this? And hopefully we can, come to some follow-ups, some things people can do to help prevent this from happening to themselves.
Sure.
Because as I want to tell a story in a soon-to-be future episode, I am the guy who normally looks at folks and goes, "Oh man, you fell for that? How did you not like?
Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this.
Blinking,
not to do this.
That
Come
page
on.
has the blinking text HTML tag.
Sure.
It's not legit. What are you doing?" And I will say that I have not been roped in on one of these kind of ever until very recently in a very unique way.
It just happened.
So yeah, and it's kind of phishing, but it's kind of not.
It's a great story, and hopefully we'll do it next week or the week
It's the perfect alignment of all the planets, much like the solar eclipse. So I think it'll be fun to tell. But anyway, I thought this would be fun to give some background on. And I was starting to think of things like, okay, what's causing this to happen? And one thing that is just, to me, is most obvious is in the U.S. here, where mostly you're seeing these USPS attempts, the cell phone networks, we don't have any even basic authentication. Like, you can just flood the network. They do some spam prevention, but not much. There's no real auth. There's no real cost, right? We're talking about SMS, but
okay.
Even more true for email.
Do you know what they call SMS phishing? It has a name.
Phishing.
Smishing.
Is it called smishing?
Yeah.
You love this part of the episode, don't you?
I do.
You just take random names. Do you know what they call SMS phishing if you're in an airplane?
What?
I don't know. I'm sure you're going to tell me, aren't you?
No, I got nothing.
Mile high fishing? Oh, fuck, Jeff.
Yeah, sure.
All right, give me another one. What do you call fishing if you're at the beach? I don't know, Jeff. Can we just get on with the episode, please? And obviously, the U.S. to me is a convenient target because most everybody speaks English. So English gets you access to just about everybody as opposed to
we use SMS as opposed to most of the rest of the world that's using WhatsApp.
That's a good point, although there's a lot of spam on WhatsApp too, arguably easier to control than SMS, because SMS is just this black hole. But I think it's cheap in the US. Like, if I look at sending SMS rates in other countries, it's usually a lot more expensive.
Sure.
You need a higher yield in order for that to make sense if you're spamming.
If I want to set up a phishing campaign, can I set that up using some standard SMS provider, some mass SMS provider?
I think so for a while. I think if they get enough complaints, it gets shut down. But that's the other thing too. How do you report? So you get an SMS for a site, Jeff's USPS.top. who do you complain to get back to Twilio if they're using Twilio to shut down Twilio?
Everybody uses Twilio. Everyone uses Twilio for their SMS campaigns, right?
For the most part, sure.
If you want to authenticate Signal, when you first put in Signal Private Messenger,
there's a handshake.
It has to authenticate. Yes, it authenticates you via SMS. It's using Twilio. So so Twilio is used for SMS campaigns. I mean, if you are going to, in a cost-effective way, do an SMS blast, Twilio is the way to do it.
Yeah, there's no handshake in SMS. There's no approval. There's no the providers don't have any system for you to say, yes, I want to receive texts from this person. It is all honor system. You can say stop and it'll stop and they'll manage it. Also, the way we manage short codes and shared short codes is a pain in the ass. It's not great. It is a very old system that has not been updated, unfortunately. So, but also the networks themselves, the cell networks themselves have not done a great job in helping the situation. So remember, AT&T just recently kind of copped that enormous breach that they had.
Sure.
Of course, as is typical, right? Their penalty is to email everybody, say sorry, give them a couple free months of identity theft monitoring.
Click on this link to get your free months of identity.
Exactly. This is a legitimate email.
Exact phishing problem.
It's a legit email from AT&T. This email came to me from AT&T at message.att-mail.com.
Right.
I've never been to att-mail.com. I have never emailed anybody at att-mail.com.
Of course.
Let alone message.att-mail.com. They've literally made part of the problem worse by doing the same thing that they're telling people not to do.
Exactly.
By the way, if you click through this, it links to ExperienIDWorks.com, whatever in the fuck that is, and asks you for your SSN.
Right.
How is this different from USPS-lookup.com?
No, of course it's
it
not
looks
in any
like
way.
a fucking phishing site.
Course.
So how do you expect even a knowledgeable technical end user? I'll use my father as an example. Yeah, he's older. He's technically well-versed. He gets it.
Right.
And he'll see something and he'll ask me to be like, how do I know? And I'm going to explain that he's got to go pull DNS records and look into a whois lookup? No.
Never going to happen.
How is that acceptable?
Sure.
Which reminds me, I've linked it in the show before, but I absolutely must, whenever we start talking about this, I absolutely must plug my old friend Dean Cameron's Spam Scam Show, which is the best thing I've ever seen. And I've plugged it here before. We should have Dean on the show or something because it's so good. I will put a link in the show notes for that. But my point is, AT&T is trying to make this problem worse. I suspect, I'm not trying to make excuses for AT&T, but I suspect they've got enough internal business red tape and ingrained technical hurdles. It is 2 orders of magnitude easier for them to spin up another domain to do this shit than trying to put it onto their existing platform that probably has 85 different gates changes have to go through.
Sure.
So I get it, but if you think about it from the user's perspective, it's terrible.
You've just exactly made the problem worse.
Yeah. And that's AT&T right there in the middle of what, I don't know, they've got probably a quarter or a third of all the US mobile providers, and they're arguably making this problem much worse for them. Talking about URLs, right here I'm bitching about att-mail.com. Trying to zoom back a little bit. It's been hard enough for me to teach folks like my parents or folks that are Luddites or more Luddite or didn't grow up with technology as much. You got to try to teach them about the URL, look for the root URL, not USPS.jeffyjeff.com.
Sure.
It's a little hard to parse the URL, especially when it's long, it's got parameters in it, and they're trying to figure it out. And one of those parameters will say USPS.com, and they go, well, there it is right there. And I'm like, yeah, it's a parameter. Now you're explaining HTTP to them. They've already fallen asleep. So now you're trying to wake them up to explain the rest to them. It's a terrible process. But what's interesting to me is I think about now, especially the younger users that have grown up, not so much with computers, but with phones, right? They've had their whole life with a phone.
Yeah, for sure.
And you think about the app experience and where screen real estate is at a premium. And I think about a lot of applications that will shell out, I call it shell out, but will, pop a browser window.
Sure.
And they don't show you the URL.
Right.
How am I supposed to trust you?
Yeah, right.
How do I even know that the cert on this page is valid? I don't know.
Of course, you have no way of seeing it.
So you have this, I think about it as URL separation from the UX. And the more of that happens, and I appreciate why, it certainly does look good, you're just making the problem worse. People are just getting farther and farther away from being able to vet it and validate that it's legit and that it actually works.
I'm dying to try that on my phone now to see if I can't get to the cert.
From within applications in iOS, at least 2/3 or more show me the URL, and I think I can see the cert on them. But I definitely get some that pop, and there is nothing in the bar. It's just nothing. It's just a web page. And it's okay, if they were putting in the app versus the web page any different, I'm like, well, yeah, you could have a man-in-the-middle attack, right? There could be a man-in-the-middle attack the developer didn't intend. And if you're not showing me the necessary information, how do I know? How do I know it's even an SSL page?
And will Apple or Google approve anything that shells out to a web page
No
that is
idea.
not HTTPS?
Great question.
I can't believe they will. They're both very smart about those things.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I forgot to say this earlier. You would think, I mean, at least in the past, we could use SSL as a reasonable proxy, right? We could say if this domain has an SSL cert and the name looks reasonably legit, it's probably a legit link. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that's true.
It hasn't been the case for 10, 15 years.
Right.
I would say early on it was the case. When you had to pay VeriSign $900 a year and a big dance, that was a barrier to entry. Now you can...
Now that Let's Encrypt is free.
Let's Encrypt, Acme, like it's so simple.
Put it together, sure.
Which is great. I still think that ends is worth the means because you're encrypting more traffic. But what you've really done now is you've got a secure pipe. You haven't authenticated the person you're talking to. You've just secured the transit information to that person. And it's not hard to masquerade a semi-plausible URL with, like I mentioned earlier, like some parameter option or some crap that's in the URL that looks legit but isn't actually the root server name. Okay, so I wanted to think about, like, what can our listeners do?
Where do we go from here, CJ?
What's something you can do when it comes to phishing to try to be more vigilant, more proactive? We talked about sketchy URLs. Like, it's hard for me to tell someone in a short number of words how to tell if a URL is legit or not. You really want to try to find the root of the URL. So you look for the protocol, HTTPS normally, and then go through the slashes. And the first thing to the right between the slashes is the actual server, right? It's the server that you're talking to.
Right.
You want to look at the right two most sections of that. That's really what the thing is. And I'll find some links online. Somebody that explains this better than me. But like, that's what you're talking to.
Messages.google.com. And it's the google.com, the last two parts of that are the actual domain name.
Yep.
My dad would not understand any of this. And so I can't even tell him.
I know.
The thing I tell my dad is if someone sends you a link that you are not expecting,
don't click it.
Don't click it.
Unfortunately, I think that is the best answer. I really do think that is the best answer. There's other like criteria that I see in most of these phishing emails or phishing messages. They demand something urgent, right? There's always a sense of urgency.
Yeah, it's always urgent.
Right? Like this package is going to get returned because they want you to act quickly.
Act now before you think about it.
I typically find most of these that I see have grammar and spelling mistakes, which blows my mind.
I think that was true 5, maybe 10 years ago. Now I'm seeing, I don't look at email much, so I don't see as many as you might, but I don't think that's the case much anymore. I think they're getting better at that.
They're definitely getting better. I would still say, roughly speaking, half of the ones I see, it's a wording, it's a spelling, it's some punctuation.
English is a second language, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and it's not well vetted, right? They don't have somebody on the other side reading going, oh, no, this is awkward. Odd greetings or salutations, that's another one. Like, basically, it's how I write most of my emails. I'll be like, good day, Jeffrey, like, because I'm a smartass. And I'll see an email, and I'm like, I don't know who you are. You're not a smartass. I think you're just, again, it's ESL. This is a big one. Inconsistencies in email address or links or domain names, like if it's all over the place.
Sure.
Typically, not all, but typically an above board provider will use a single domain for most everything.
Yeah.
Of course, not AT&T, as I mentioned earlier, but apparently they're not an above board provider. That's a whole separate episode. Suspicious attachments, right? That's the meme. That's always the joke of like some attachment. You're like, why is there an attachment? Just don't click on it.
Do not click on any attachment you are not expecting.
If you aren't expecting the attachment, just don't click on it. I can't believe it's 2024 and we still have to say, don't click on sketchy attachments.
Wow.
And please, for the love of all things holy, if it says .exe, don't open it.
Sure.
Or .com, just don't open it. It's a different .com. I know you think it's the same .com. It's not.
.js.
Why those still work on Windows machines? Oh, .js, another great example.
Yeah.
Really anything. Just don't open a fucking attachment, right?
Sure.
Problem solved. I think that's the answer. And then of course, I think this is like the most obvious. If they're requesting login credentials or payment information, right? Any sensitive data, that's probably bad.
Send that right away then.
Right, yeah, you want to forward that, right? Especially if it says for Jeff. Fund Jeff.
And then you want to hurry.
You want to hurry. You do want to hurry up because he did greet you by saying, hello, dear sir. So that one can be a little tough because how is that different than you going to the Department of Water and Power and it asks for your email address, right? So you don't really know that it's not the legit site.
But don't click. But if you have an email that comes to you from the Water and Power company, go by your own browser.
Go to their site.
Go to their site yourself.
Go to their
and
site.
Log in yourself.
That's the best path, right?
Then you can find out if this is a legitimate thing you need to do or your water gets shut off.
Or have one of if your kids are under 30 or one of your grandkids look at it and they will tell you. They will follow the same Google flowchart that I do.
Sure.
And Google it. This is actually, I think, a dead giveaway. And it shocks me that people still fall for this. If they don't take normal payment types, right? If all they take is like bank payments or Zelle, money transfer, or like crypto,
coupons. Yes.
you are probably not at a legitimate site. If they're asking you to go buy green dot cards, which is a legitimate scam, and I know people that have been scammed out of tens of thousands of dollars buying green dot cards. I'm like, at what point did you not realize this was a fucking scam? But they use this urgency.
A dear friend's father got a call, thought it was from his grandson, who he thought had been kidnapped.
Yeah.
And he had to go get these, same sort of thing.
Or in a car accident or arrested or something.
Right.
Again, urgency, right? And these poor people just want to help their loved ones and they end up doing this.
And desperately doing the right thing. Just don't know.
There's another.
Fortunately, in this case, his wife called the son and said, have you seen so-and-so? And he's like, yeah, he's standing right here.
He's right here. Yeah, of course. He's right here.
Okay, great. So really not kidnapped.
They pinch him. Make sure he's real. Right. There's another, this is a little more nuanced, but I have found this to generally be true in a lot of these cases. The forms where you're entering the data will have terrible validation.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you can like take a credit card field and just put a bunch of letters and gobbledygook in it.
Sure.
Hit submit. And what it should say, it shouldn't even let you put those letters in, right? Or what it should say is like an invalid card number. But a lot of times it'll just be like card failed. Please try again, which is another great trick of these phishing sites. You can put in a legitimate card number, an expiration and all that shit, hit submit, and it'll be like card failed. Please try another, because now they're getting 2 bites at the apple.
Right.
And some poor people will put in 2, 3, 4 cards and then go, oh, site must be down. No, they just.
And the frustrating thing is that happens at real legitimate sites. So you make it work worse. You train us that we have to put multiple credit cards in. The credit card system is a real problem.
Crazy. Well, that has gotten it's way better in 2024 than I expected. The fact that we have tap and chip now is great. It still has some huge holes in it.
My child mocks me every time I go into Yogurtland and I tap my watch to pay, because he's like, why do you do that? Why? Because it doesn't give my real credit card number. It gives an alias number, and there's a whole, wonderful level of security there.
Oh, I thought he mocked you because he's like, Dad, why don't you waddle over to Health Nut instead of Yogurtland?
Well, he would do that too. He would mock me for that too.
It's like, how about some like a little shot of wheatgrass? All right, buddy?
You a little less with the sugary ice cream.
I mean, tap is great. Tap with your watch and phone is great. There are still, the vast majority, especially online, requires credit card number input. I will say Google has done a great job. I'm sure others have too, but the one I've experienced recently is Google's integration with Google Pay for virtual card numbers on cards. That's excellent. That's a feature I had back in like the 2000s, 2001. And every time I go to a sketchy site, I would just generate like a card with like a $50 limit, expires in 2 months, and give them that and be like, good luck, guys. Like, you're not getting anything out of that.
I got you stopped here. By the way, PayPal now is integrated with most PayPal sites. If you've kept up with your integration on your website, will now include Apple Pay and Google Pay.
Yeah,
which solves those problems.
I am super impressed with what PayPal has done from an integration perspective. I used to just avoid it. It was clunky. It was a pain in the ass. It's now kind of one of my preferred.
It's pretty great.
I'd say between PayPal and Stripe, I lean towards both of them. I think Stripe's also a great interface and just
biometric ID is fantastic.
Well, passkeys. I think passkeys are really what you want, across the web. But I will say, I've said this before, I'll say it again here. It'll help with all of these accounts that you could be phished on. Turn on two-factor authentication, right? Even via SMS. I'd argue that a validated phone account is the easiest two-factor mechanism to deploy as from a developer's perspective, but also to rely on for users to use successfully. Like if you have people use a code generator locally, they probably don't understand how important it is to not lose that seed, right? And if you reseed them via an SMS, just fucking use SMS. Like it's the same. You haven't really saved yourself anything. So I still think two-factor specifically via SMS is a much better solution than just simple password authentication. That has not changed anytime soon. So even though I'm saying SMS can be not great and isn't well trusted, use it for these one-time codes that you'll get for two-factor authentication.
It's better than nothing. It's much better than nothing.
Oh man, it's way better. To me, this is like, I use the analogy, the car analogy from the 90s when people would put clubs on their car. And I'd be like, why do you put a club on your car? They can literally just cut the steering wheel and take it.
Because it makes it a little harder to take than that guy's car.
Makes it a little harder. So now you want to go take the next guy's car because she's like, this one's got a club, that one doesn't. I'm taking the one that doesn't, right? And it's kind of the same thing here. Like you have to do a little more work to get into somebody's account that's got two-factor. But
Dad, if you're still listening, don't click any links. Do not click any links that you don't know are expressly coming to you right at that moment.
Unless it comes from legit.messages.att-mail.top.
Don't click, Dad.
Those ones are okay.
Dad, nope, don't click. All right, we have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
Well, yes, it's a throwback. I love that you do the current stuff. I like to do the old stuff. I watched Siskel and Ebert on Johnny Carson with Chevy Chase, right? Chevy Chase was kind of sitting on the couch. He'd already been interviewed. It was kind of hysterical because Johnny was asking Siskel Ebert about how they review comedies and is it easier and is it not? And of course, Siskel and Ebert disagree as they normally do.
That's what made them interesting.
Johnny kind of loses control a little bit and they're going on. It's always fun to see him rein that back in. They've got Chevy Chase sitting right behind him on the couch. And like Johnny literally asks this softball question to Ebert and says, well, which I don't want to talk about the dogs, but like, which movie can you not recommend? And he's like, I can't recommend Three Amigos. And
with Chevy right behind him.
Meanwhile, you got Chevy Chase sitting right next to him. And I really thought Chase did a great job because he even said at one point, it was like, I'm sorry, what movies are you in next? Right? Like throwing a little shade back at them. But it was really fun. And I really enjoyed watching some of these old late night shows that I didn't appreciate as much, even if it's all grainy 4-3. The humor's awesome. And it's just really fun to hear Johnny's voice again. So
Johnny was absolutely amazing.
That's what I saw. How about you?
I'm going to recommend Fat Ham at the Geffen Playhouse. It's 2022's Pulitzer Prize winner for drama, nominated for 5 Tony Awards, including Best Play. That's no reason you should see it. You should see it because it's great. It's the story of Juicy, a young black man confronted by the ghost of his father during a barbecue, who demands that Juicy avenge his murder. Juicy, already familiar with Hamlet's plight, Fat Ham, Hamlet, get it?
I got it.
Tries to break the cycles of trauma and violence. The New York Times calls it a hilarious yet profound tragedy smothered in comedy. Fat Ham at the Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles through May the 11th.
This, almost certainly, this performance has put the Geffen security staff into disarray.
Why is that?
Because whenever I go there, their code word for when I get there is Fat Ham in the building. Fat Ham in the building.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're doing now. And by the way, I got to believe the only thing worse than being confronted by the ghost of your father during a barbecue is when my father himself confronts me at a barbecue.
Sure.
And he'll come over and he'll be like, are the ribs done? I'm like, no. He's like, can I open it? I'm like, why would you open it? It's just going to take it longer to cook. Like, can you please?
You're slowing it down, Dad.
Just sit down. And he's like, where's my pay for being floor director? I'm like, just shut up. The ribs will be done in an hour.
That's the episode.
Thank you for joining us for All This Nonsense, a truly terrible podcast from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu Little.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, My Favorite Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Nonsense is produced using the Audur multi-track digital audio workstation. Amazing, full-featured software, open source and free. This trick where you can understand me talking while music plays underneath is done with Audur. Check it out. Special thanks to our floor director, Craig Little.
Thanks, Dad. We'll be here every Thursday morning for more nonsense. Please join us. It doesn't make this show any easier when we're sitting here talking and I look over in the control booth and I just have my dad giving me that look of disappointment. Just as I'm telling a story and he's like, you fucking did that, really? Like, come on. And he's just like shaking his head, just a little sad.